Bridging the global gap between the rich and poor nations is a continuous struggle. One major way in which the rich countries try to broker equity funding assistance to the world's poorest or challenged nations is to give some measure of cushion here and there. It is estimated in development circles that about 18 trillion US dollars flow into Africa annually to assist the poor countries. Unfortunately, Nigeria being one of these poor countries. That we get a good portion of this multi-sectoral funds into the various social services, especially in education, health, and other sectors. The donor communities are getting fatigued. An inflow of funding is rapidly phasing out. What will become of our social services in education, in health, water resources, particularly the ones that these donor countries have continually supported? Now, take for example stoppage of HIV and TB, leprosy, reproductive health, etc. Funding these huge social interventions has its implication if and when and how this support from donor countries stop. Now, some people say it is a catastrophe waiting to happen. Or imagine our educational or health system nosedive from its current poor state of financing. Imagine the devastating effects on our economic and financial life and its implication for our low GDP. What does this portend for our nation? What do you think of the Nigerian health or education or water resources or sometimes even infrastructure sectors? What can governments and individuals do? What is the role of the private sector? These apprehensions are the focus of this special episode of Bridges. Welcome, I'm MAKANJUOLA. We are on the bridge and we are working for a sustainable society. Well, today we have women in here and the men are in the minority. So let's start with the men. So I'll introduce on the panel two of our lead discussants, Dr. MOJI Ejike. You've been here before, and welcome again on Bridges.
Thank you, MOJI.
Now, Dr. Abiola, who is next to him on, I think on his right, is Dr. Abiola Akeode. She's the Executive Director, Women Advocates Research and Documentation Center. You are welcome. It's been quite a while we wanted you on this program, so welcome. Then our sister that constantly and consistently have supported Bridges is Hawa Shekaro. You are welcome.
Thank you.
So, and here we have concerned advocates of this issue that is burning, and it looks like we're not actually speaking to it. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're all welcome on Bridges. So let's get to it. Let's first of all try to analyze where are we now in terms of dependency on donor intervention in all of these sectors which I have spoken to at the introduction. Let's start with the gentleman.
Thank you, MOJI. I'm glad that you brought this up to be discussed on this program. For me, if we look at the resources Nigeria has, and if we look at what development aid, the quantum of development aid that comes into the country, looking at it in terms of percentages of the resources that we even have every year to deploy, we don't need anybody's aid. A few years ago, I don't know what the numbers are, but at least I know by about 4 or 5 years ago, all international development funding that comes into this country or come into this country is less than 1% of our GDP. Maybe it's got up to 2% now, I'm not quite sure. I don't want to quote numbers that I'm not sure about. But the one I'm sure about is that a few years ago, it was less than 1% of our GDP. So what this means to me is that if we efficiently, transparently, and then use issues of accountability to deploy our resources in the country, we'll go so much and we don't need anybody's aid. But however, having said that, aid doesn't really come only in terms of quantum of money. Aid also comes in terms of technical support, resources in terms of managerial skills, those are the ones that I know that we lack, and forever will be grateful to donors who come to give us aid. But I'm a firm advocate for program for results. You don't just give money. I will give you a credit if you do A, B, C, and D. If you spend $1, I'm going to match it with another $1 if you do A, B, C, and D. And before I give you that $1, I want to see that money. That's why I'm very, very delighted with this Saving 1 Million Lives money. It's program for results. And then you can see all the states are working very hard to earn that credit. That's the only way it can work in the country. But if you give people money, it's everybody's money.
So having established the state, to let us know that, okay, about 1% of it comes, but they don't usually just come in terms of money, but in terms of experts also being able to build capacity here. When all these goes off, where are we, Dr. Akeode, please? I need you.
Well, I think that it's really something of concern, because generally people know as we speak that there is what we call support or donor fatigue, and of course we can trace this to a lot of reasons. There's been a lot of collapse also, economic crisis from the global west, and that's affecting almost everybody in terms of funds. So the funds that we used to have has decreased because they also probably have other things, you know, that they want to use the money for in their own country. So then also the fact that the country has transited from military regime where there was a lot of need for, you know, donor support to a democratic regime, so to say. So there's a general assumption that things are better and we should be able to manage the largest that we have, you know, within this country to address some of our issues within the country. If you look at most of the countries where we get the funds from, yes, while we have some funds, some aids that come directly from government, and I can also say that categorically that Nigeria has also done a lot of that before with the support to Syria loan, you know, to some of the ECOWAS country when they were in crisis. So meaning that it's not as if we also don't do that, you know, to other countries, and also that also clarify the fact that it's not as if we don't have capacity, you know, to do it, to also support our own people. But the point is that it seems that our own issue is not a priority to us anyway, particularly when it has to do with health, education, and some of the things that we're expected to focus more on. And just to say this quickly, in those countries like America, so you have like Ford Foundation. These are also private agencies who have made some money, but we have very few of that, apart from Danjuma Foundation and one or two, except if it's like Shell Foundation or MTN. We don't have, despite the fact that we have quite a lot of people within the country that could do that, they don't see putting money in this kind of thing.
Yeah, well, we'll come to that because we need to build a bridge after all, and there's a gap. That's why we yeah. So, well, my sister Hawa, what's your take on this?
Yeah, it appears to me that you know, we don't. I mean, the culture of investing in development, you know, by individuals is actually not there for us in Nigeria. And otherwise, when you look at the list of the you know, richest people in Africa, you find out that we have quite a good number of them who are Nigerians. But how many of them actually, you know, invest as in giving back to the society in a meaningful way, like we have other people in developed countries do? You know,
and this is the time to do that.
Precisely, this is the time to do that. And like Dr. Abiola mentioned, we've T.Y. Danjuma Foundation stands out very you know, strongly here. You know, there is a deliberate attempt to empower local, you know, based organizations in terms of giving them funding to develop the communities where they are, and you can see a track record of you know, support that has come from that foundation to the community based. So if we see many of our rich people do something like that, I'm sure no matter how small, we will see we'll get some traction in that.
Yeah, let's look at the areas that are most affected when we talk about donor dependency. Yeah, you know, that there are sectors that are most affected, and we can't pull out. You know, when you pull out that intervention, there will be a gap, and we don't want this gap. Quickly from the lead discussants, then we'll go to the audience. What are the sectors that would be affected?
Particularly health, and we know the importance of health. Like I was discussing somewhere, I was like, what is the meaning of right to life when I do not have the right to access quality health care? It makes a nonsense of that right, to life. And we know that our health system, there are lots of gaps therein, and we do not have, for instance, in the budget that has just been signed, how much was actually allocated to health? It's not enough. In fact, it's just a fraction. It's like a drop in the ocean to deal with all the different health challenges that we are facing in the country.
Yes.
Yes, in terms of, if you mean international development assistance,
that's what we've been talking
yes,
about.
Yes, if they pull out, isn't it? Let me give you a clear example in the issue of immunization. By 2023, Nigeria will be needing $623 million, $20 million to be able to immunize all the children that this country will produce. And then that warning has been sounded over and over and over and over again. So what we will expect to see is that we should, in a measured way, start increasing our allocation nationally to that sector. And then, you know, immunization happens to be the one magic bullet. If you get it right, it's the most return on investment you can do in a health intervention. Yet we are not paying attention to it. So Gavi will exit 2023, and the amount of money being brought in by Gavi, including the one we put in the pot, is about $623 million. So this is one major funding gap that is going to come. The other major funding gap that's going to come is in the issues of commodities for family planning. As we speak, the Association for the Advancement of Family Planning was able years ago to advocate to government to start putting money on the table. Before, only international donor agencies put money on the table for our commodities. We were putting zero. So in the last administration, they started with $3 million and made a promise of bringing another additional $8.3 million for reproductive health commodities, not just family planning. That never happened. The only thing that came was $3 million. Occasionally it came $1 million, $2 million. This present administration has at least increased. We now have $4 million they committed, and it's been put in the budget for last fiscal year. So I expect minimum that $4 million will be there. But that's a tip of the iceberg about the money we need. In the last costed implementation plan that was done after the blueprint on family planning was developed, we need $12.3 million annually to be able to meet the target we have set for ourselves, 27% by 2020. Now, we are putting only $4 million. So there's a gap of that 12 point something million dollars to 4. That money is being brought by the international donor agencies. And let me tell you the one that I'm really worried about. Trump administration, through the GAD rule, has said he's not going to fund a lot of countries or a lot of things that have anything to do with abortion advocacy. And one of those areas that will be hard hit is UNFPA. UNFPA, USAID happened to be the two major organizations that put money on the table for family planning. Imagine when that money is withdrawn and we do not bring in another replacement. It's going to be a disaster.
What's your take?
Well, just to follow up on what you said, maternal mortality maternal health is also another issue that I think should be a big concern for us. We know that when MDG was launched, that was one area that a lot of investment came into. While there's been a lot of improvement in that area, but we still need to do a lot. Nigeria is still second to India in the number of women who die while giving birth. So I think that that's an area that is very important to us, also as women.
So sectorally, we know that there will be a gap
Yes.
in health. So that's one area that we need as a matter of urgency to start looking into. Well, I'll come back to our advocates here. Where do we go from here? Let's, any of you can start. Let's know you.
My name is Wumi Ashubi Arodada, and I'm a gender advocate. I would like to say that one area where there would be a huge gap with the, if donor dependency, or donor aid does reduce, would be in the area of gathering of data. Because in this country, until we had a recent head of the NBS, we were not gathering data the way that we should be gathering data. And we need data to plan, and plan effectively. We know that the NDHS, which though is a national survey, that's the National Demographic Health Survey, is one that is supported by donor partners in this country. Without that, we would be unable to plan. Not only that, the technical expertise that is required by both government and other service providers in this country would be totally at risk, because most of those that provide services, either technically or otherwise, are donor dependent in this country. A lot of the projects that are giving us results that we're at least proud of when it comes to MDGs until we move to SDGs are dependent on donor funding. And lastly, before I yield the floor to someone else, would be in the area of governance. Particularly women's political participation in this country has been largely funded by donor agencies. The government...
Okay, my name is Memuna Yakub Mohammed. I'm the Executive Director of Society for Women Development and Empowerment of Nigeria. Before the organization, I've been in the government in the area of HIV/AIDS. All of us sitting down here know that the red signal has been on for quite a long time, because donors have been withdrawing gradually, and there's need for us to now take charge. If not, there's a catastrophe waiting to happen. HIV/AIDS, for example. We have a lot of people now on ARV who are not producing. Opportunistic infections, we are not producing. We have people to be tested, are not being tested. We have to create awareness, we are not doing that. We don't know what is happening at the community level. And if you look at the funding, the government funding, where it comes, is more at the national. The responsibility of the states and the local government doesn't come out clearly. We are just talking about the budget, the national budget. What is the role of the government, the state government? What are they doing to put in money? We have to decentralize funding. We have to come back. We have built a lot of capacity. All of us sitting down here enjoy capacity. We have capacities. But when are we going to use these capacities that these donors give us to look at issues that concern or that is homegrown? If you look at funding most of the time, it comes with deliverables. From each donor has a deliverable that is interested in. But when are we going to sit down as Nigeria to look at the issues we have and the resources we have? We need to start engaging the communities to put in resources so that we can move together. If we don't do that, we continue to grumble, and it's not going anywhere.
Okay, right.
Yes, my name is Dr. Lemota Gurusogiwa, the Director of International Women Communication Center. For me, I want to advocate that we should continue to fund women's rights. And the reason is that the first question you asked yourself, why do we get funding? Why do we fund people? Why do we support you? Why don't you support yourself as a country? Yes, we are not able to support ourselves because of the injustice that has been perpetrated in developing countries, such as Nigeria, our country. Even up to today, there are a lot of injustice going on, especially for the women's rights in communities and villages. But many people do not take cognizance of this injustice. They think that it's part of the system. It's not part of the system. We need to address it. And nobody will put money on the ground for you to address injustice when they themselves are the perpetrators of the injustice. So we need to continue to fund women's human rights at all levels in socio-economic justice.
And this, you think would build the bridge to. Well, let's hear from the male part. Let's get the male perspective now. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Edosa. I am a member of the Choice for Life Advocates. Maybe just to reiterate what some of the panelists have already said. Issue of maternal mortality. If we are talking about maternal mortality, then we can't ignore a major contributor to maternal mortality in Nigeria presently, which is the issue of complications from unsafe abortion. And all of this, over time, we'll be hearing stakeholders, partners talking about we need to reduce our maternal mortality, we need to bring it down. But what are we really doing in terms of addressing that issue of unsafe abortion? And now the global gag rule itself has come to limit how much the US funding can assist in that. So my major concern now is, here we are. What do we do as a country?
That's why we are building the bridge.
Our hands and just watch why the funding reduce, and then we are just watching. And then, just as Dr. MOJI said, we have enough resources if we are deliberate enough in our budgeting. And so we need to really be deliberate in our budgeting to see how we address this gap that is already created by the global gag rule.
What does the global gag rule says? Once you collect funding from the US government, you can't even use your own money to carry out advocacy in educating women on abortion, prevention, whatever. You can't even do that. You can't use your, not that you're using their money, no. Using another source of income, probably from your pocket, to do that. You can't do that.
Duke from the International Society of Media and Public Health. I think one way we are lacking is that we get the donor money. Sometimes we acquire a lot of resources that we don't maintain well. Maintenance is part of our problems, because you get a lot of equipment, you get a lot of know-how, and then it goes to waste.
Yes.
Yeah, I quite appreciate all the comments from the audience, and what it actually shows is that we do have a lot that we can contribute on our own part. However, I stand to be corrected. It still does not take away the fact that we need help. We need help in this country. Particularly, I want to bring in the area where I work. If you look at maternal mortality ratio and the percentage that unsafe abortion contributes to, it's quite high. Yet, what clear intervention does the government put in place in order to address that?
Trump's global gag rule is much more destructive than Bush's global gag rule.
That's right.
Trump global gag rule put in by Bush took out about $660 million from the pot that goes to advocacy for family planning, for so far as you have anything to do with abortion. Even if it's advocacy, say don't do abortion, they will tag you. The Trumps will remove $6-point-something billion from that pot. So it's more than, it's 10% of what was being removed. They are going to remove 90% plus that 10%, so to speak. So, and that's why, for me, it's important as a country we realize that and make hay while the sun is still shining.
Now, speaking about accountability, I like the passion. It's important. It's important that we retrace our staff. We can't continue having a country where we have graduates that cannot spell their names. It's absolutely unacceptable. We don't want to blame the graduates, but we want to blame the system.
It's not.
We want to blame the system. So, and for us to be able to rebuild the system, it's not a matter for the government alone. It's a total reorientation. Our value system must change.
Thank you. I'll just take it there from you. Our value system must change. And this is where we're going. I believe that is the study bridge that we've been able to build today. We're looking inside, inbuilt capacities that will institutionalize issues for us, so that we can actually go to bed on a lot of these issues that a lot of us went to school in Nigeria. We didn't have to go to school abroad ever. You know, whatever things you did, you don't, by the way, was when they came. So we need to have the good old times back, but making it sustainable within the context of Nigerians funding their needs transparently and giving accountability a place, and making sure that infrastructure and contents are of quality. When we have all that rolled into one, like we have here today, then we can build that prosperous Nigeria, not just for us, but for those yet unborn. So I want to thank you for building a bridge today. We do hope that it will be sustainable as we look forward to more issues that will keep us ahead of time and build a better Nigeria. Thanks for coming.